It's got to be interesting marketing to developers. That's a completely different category, right? And so clearly you've pulled on a big thread and able to reach them and engage them and connect with them. What is that like? What's it like to market to that community? What have you learned in the last 3 years marketing to developers, and tie that into this thing of users driving new users? I love that.
Yeah. So kind of two pieces there. Let me dig into marketing to developers, which some folks will tell you is an oxymoron. For me, I mean, just speaking personally, when I came onto Postman, it was a huge culture shift because I had marketed certainly to technical audiences before, but not global technical audiences at the scale quite this directly. And I can tell you for, I would say probably at least the first 6 months, I would write everything down. I'm like, hey, I want to go in this direction. I want to, this kind of copy direction. I want, this strategy. And then I come back around and be like, cross out, cross out, cross out, reframe, because it just doesn't make sense. We've got a great leadership team at Postman. Our three founders, actually developers.
That's cool.
My advice to anybody walking into any type of organization, if you're in the developer space, at least one, if not all, of the founders should be developers, should be very advanced technically, because they're going to help guide you and give you the right kind of feedback, direction, platform so that will set you up for success. So it was kind of funny. So it was definitely, I would say, almost a culture shock for me, which was a little bit surprising because I'd been in technical companies before. I mean, that's where I started my career, but just not to quite this extent. I'll say, a couple other things that set us up for success at Postman is we really truly focus on solving real problems for users. We're not just building it because we think it's cool. We're not just building it because we can. We spend so much time. A really, really large chunk of my time is, like literally listening to what folks are talking about on Twitter. Sitting in individual customer calls, making individual connections with customers, reviewing what folks are, saying on forums or even GitHub or some of these other places. Like, oh, why are they saying that? What's the why behind that question? And then what can we solve for that? And when you have that as a start, then everything else that flows from that, you just communicate from a place of authenticity. I joke, I'm like, if there's adverbs, if there's a lot of things that end in ly in our copy or our direction, we rip it out. No fluff, no overly marketing needs. I just rather communicate from a place of empathy and authenticity. And when you start by solving real problems for folks, it ends up kind of flowing quite naturally from there. So I'd say that's kind of one piece of it. You also talked about users encouraging other users. It's a phenomenal model. Part of why it works is honestly, you can start with us for free. And that's a huge part. You see a lot of companies talking about, oh, we're going to add on a free version and that's how we're going to drive all this product-like growth. It's kind of interesting. It certainly absolutely works for some folks. Our business model works very, very well for us. I would say kind of be clear about what you offer folks. We like to align our monetization model around what drives value for folks who are willing to pay. So for example, we're always free for single developers. And actually, we even changed and opened that up even more recently within the last year or so to be available for free to teams with 3 or fewer developers. The small teams can even collaborate. Because what we found is when you're in that small of a group collaborating, we really wanted to unlock the potential of developers collaborating with one another. And individual developers, I mean, it stinks to have to pull out your credit card and pay for something individually if you're trying to unlock some of that organizational funding for tooling or platforms, right? And so we aligned with where are we providing value that aligns with organizations having resources. So for example, once you've got more than 3 folks, you're really collaborating at a certain level of scale, driving a tremendous developer productivity for organizations who appreciate it because now we're impacting the bottom line. So that's where we kind of align and drive through there. So yeah, in that model, when you've got organizations, they're like, oh, hey, this is going to save some time. Just work on this individually. And then as you collaborate larger and larger, that's where we kind of align. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, are there things that you put in place to support users driving users? Like what are some of the macro strategies or things that are you seeing that work really well for users driving users? Maybe a campaign or some initiative or something, or is there anything specific you can share around that?
Yeah, this was built into the product itself before product-led growth was even like a well-adopted term. So we have something called Run in Postman. And what it is users can package up a bunch of API requests, put them into collections, assemble them together in a way that makes sense, and then add a Run in Postman button to their website that then new users can come in and say, oh, hey, I'm going to click this run in Postman. It brings it all into their instance and they can start to play with it and really experience. And that for us aligned very much with kind of where Postman started. Just like, hey, how do you explore an API? How do you begin testing an API? How do you understand what another API does? And so that run in Postman button just became this wildly easy way for new users to experience an API. So it became this huge value add that just drove some of that exponential growth.
This podcast is brought to you by Salesforce and the CMO Club. The CMO Club is a global community for senior marketing executives to come together, share ideas, and solve their toughest challenges in a collaborative and trusted environment with other marketing leaders. Salesforce and the CMO Club provide best-in-class programs, events, and a digital platform for marketing leaders to come together and be inspired like never before. Join our global community at thecmoclub.com.